Pat Smith is probably the most underrated quarterback I've ever had.
Those were the comments of SHG head coach Ken Leonard at the beginning of this season. That was during our Gone Camping series. And even though he had conviction in his voice when he said it, there are a lot of people who follow the CS8, myself included, who I think continued to underestimate Pat Smith. That is until Friday night. On Friday night, SHG versus Springfield, Pat Smith threw for 507 yards. That's a CS8 record. Nobody in the CS8 has ever thrown for 500 plus yards in a game until Friday. So it's obviously also an SHG record. He crushed Bobby Breneisen's one-game record. That was 387 yards. 507 yards on Friday night, 120 yards better than the best ever single game performance by an SHG quarterback. Now with the single game record underneath his belt, thought it might be interesting to start looking at season records and career records, see where Smith is on those lists, and not surprisingly so, he is climbing the ranks quickly as one of the best all-time quarterbacks to come through SHG. Let's start with the season marks, and this year, so far, through 5 games, Smith's thrown for 1,273 yards. He's 16th on the all-time single-season list. Bobby Breneisen is first on that list. 3,284 yards is the mark. Smith, 2,011 yards behind Breneisen. So here's what he'd have to do to get there. If SHG played just 4 more games, they've got 4 more regular season games, he'd have to throw for 502 yards per game to match Breneisen's mark. Now that's unlikely. What's more likely is the fact that SHG will play some playoff games. Should the Cyclones make a state title game this year, that's 9 games they would play. That means that he'd have to throw for 223 yards per game, and he would beat Bobby Breneisen's record for single season passing yardage. From a career standpoint, Smith is currently 7th on the SHG all-time passing yardage list, 1 spot ahead of Derek Leonard, who he moved ahead of on Friday. He's got 3,170 career yards. Bobby Breneisen holds the top spot, 6,443 career yards. That's not going to be touched, not by Smith, maybe not by many people, but the guy in second place is Bart Geiser. He threw for 4,009 yards. If Smith throws for just 209 yards in each of the final 4 regular season games, he'll climb from 7th to 2nd. He'll pass Geiser, and odds are that he's going to have some postseason games to add to that total as well. So it would not be unlikely that Pat Smith ends his career as the 2nd all-time leading passer in SHG history. He's only thrown for less than 210 yards one time this season. That was against Glenwood, so to expect him to throw for an average of 210 yards this year, not unlikely at all. Now, if there's any doubt left about Smith's all-time spot in SHG history, here's some numbers that are going to push you over the edge. Smith is 172 of 251 in his career. That's a 69% completion percentage. The very first pass he threw in high school when he was a junior, that was last year against Glenwood, was thrown for an interception. Since then, he's completed 171 passes. He's thrown the ball 250 times without an interception. In the meantime, Smith's thrown for 42 touchdowns, 23 last season, and 19 so far this year. If he was underrated, he shouldn't be anymore. He's going to be one of the best SHG quarterbacks of all time and probably one of the top CS8 quarterbacks that we've ever seen.